Herzlich willkommen beim Podcast der Gentleman's Clinic Zürich, heute mit einem ganz besonderen Gast. Seine Karriere hat im Bollywood gestartet, ging bis nach Hollywood und ist in Italien mit der Rolle Sandokan durch die Decke gegangen. Er ist auch ein Best-Selling-Author mit seinem Buch Stories I Must Tell, ist sogar ein James Bond auch gewesen als Bösewicht und ist heute hier in der Gentleman's Clinic exklusiv für ein Gespräch mit mir, für eine spannende Unterhaltung, und die ist natürlich auf Englisch. Auf YouTube könnt ihr sie auch mit deutschen Untertiteln anschauen. Er ist on top sogar noch ein Voting Member der Oscar Academy, also ein Mitglied der Oscar Academy, und hat sehr, sehr viele spannende Dinge zu erzählen. Freut euch auf einen einzigartigen Podcast. I can't believe we actually finally made it here. I love that you're here. It's such a great honor to have you here as well in Zurich in the Gentleman's Clinic. And it's always a pleasure spending time with you. And the podcast is a great excuse to have an undisturbed conversation.
Right.
Where I can do a deep dive. And I remember when we were talking about the preparation, and I said that I don't like preparing too many questions, because when I see interviews or podcasts where you see someone just going through their questions,
3 pages, yeah,
and don't even reply to whatever the person is saying.
Quite right.
So thank you for taking the time.
No, I'm so delighted to be in this magnificent gentleman's clinic that you've created, and I'm really thrilled to be here. And what a wonderful setting to be having a chat. You know, we love chatting anyway, so to be chatting in this wonderful ambience is extra special.
Thank you, and I want to keep it special. It is special anyway because you're here. And when I talk to Suki, my wife, for the ones who don't know, the name Suki is always special when we talk about Gentleman's Clinic. To me, the ultimate Gentleman's Clinic, or gentleman in that sense, the ultimate gentleman to me is Kabir Bedi. That's you. And
Thank you.
I wonder, why do you think that is? What makes people think of you as a gentleman? What do you think?
I don't know. I guess I treat people well. I try to. Because that's part of my DNA. I grew up in a family that was very simple in certain ways, but they lived very high ideals. They were freedom fighters, but they didn't dress fashionably. My father wore something that looked like Moses' gown, coming down from the hill with the 10 tablets, with 10 commandments. My mother, even though she was English, she wore the simplest saris, beautiful cotton saris, but cotton saris. So I never aspired to be a gentleman in terms of the way I presented myself, in terms of style or fashion, etc. All that I learned after I moved from Delhi and I came to the city of Mumbai, Bombay in those days, and joined advertising. And that's where I saw people that inspired me in different ways.
You know, your first answer to why people think that you're a gentleman was, I don't know. Only a true gentleman would say, I don't know. And I know you came up with the answers because I asked you. So you talked about your family, which is also a big part of your book, Stories I Must Tell.
Right.
And I think the genius is actually in the title, because you have so many stories to tell. And I love that a lot of those stories are in the book, but in conversations we have, you have to do volume 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Like that, there has to be.
I couldn't put them all in. I couldn't put them all the stories in, because it would become a 600-page book, and nobody reads 600-page books anymore. But it's a career of mine that stretched from India to Italy to America, Bollywood, Italy, Hollywood, and over 3 continents, with many marriages, some divorces, and various very deep and profound relationships. It's been a tremendous journey and a tremendous learning and a tremendous set of stories that spring from situations like this. And to have had the success that I had in Europe, and to face some of the difficulties I faced in Hollywood, all that makes for good drama. Because in my book, I haven't just talked about my triumphs, because people get bored if you just make a list of, I did this, I won this, I got this prize, I went to this film festival. it becomes boring.
You could also fill a book though with your successes.
But the interesting part is when you juxtapose that against your failures and your mistakes. And everybody knows what a great guy you are, within quotes, but what's your vulnerability? What's your weaknesses? Where did you go wrong? How did you overcome that? That's the real thing that people want to learn from your autobiography. Because remember, every time somebody reads about the life of somebody else, they're saying, what's in it for me? What can I learn from it?
Because they already know that you've been Sandokan. You mentioned that you've been, by the way, you paved the way for so many stars and actors we know nowadays, like Priyanka Chopra in the United States. Nowadays, it's normal for people to cross over. But you've been the first one from Sandokan to being in James Bond,
right,
Octopussy, and to being all over the world. You were the first one to cross over from Bollywood, the biggest movie industry in the world. I learned from you.
It is.
How was that for you in terms of challenges that you mentioned earlier, when you went from country to country and cultures to cultures, expanding your career?
It's it takes some kind of daring, some kind of madness also, to say, I will go and do it and I'll see what happens. Because Bollywood,
is mad.
Bollywood is a huge industry in itself, and I had success there. And then the Italians came along, and they were looking for a tall, athletic, bearded actor, which I happened to be at the time. And I came for auditions to Rome. They tested me on all kinds of things: swimming, diving, horse riding, romantic scenes, action scenes.
They tested you in swimming and riding?
Everything. Wow. And I got the audition. So then what happens is that every actor who acts in the commercial cinema around the world has a dream of going to Hollywood. And I thought, let's push the envelope, see what happens.
That's amazing.
And I went, and I did 2 films immediately. One was a film called Ashanti with Michael Caine, Peter Ustinov, some great actors in there, Omar Sharif, one of my great friends. And also then Octopussy, the James Bond film. And then I did various American television series, etc. So it was doing something which nobody from India had done before, pushed the envelope as an actor to become international.
But also on such a high level.
Yeah.
You went to Italy, and it's not like you went to Italy and you had a small role.
No.
And something that you forgot to mention, you speak Italian. I think a lot of people don't realize che tu davvero parli italiano, parlo molto bene.
Devo parlare.
Sì, devi parlare. People are surprised nowadays how good your Italian is. And for someone not just to say, I'll go to another country and do a role, because nowadays you can produce English movies and TV shows all over the world.
Right.
But back then, for you to go, I go to Italy and I learn Italian. I mean, this is very bold.
It was a hell of a journey. And I must say, I was very lucky that I was picked for a role that was already iconic in a sense in Italy, because Emilio Salgari had written the original books. Every Italian child had read the books. There had been films on Sandokan before that had not worked.
Okay.
With
Steve,
Steve Reeves, there was a film, and it didn't do anything. And Sergio Solomao directed the series, had a vision of how this could be a series for television, a limited series, and he fought for it. He got the best art director in the world, Nino Novarese, who won an Oscar for Cleopatra. And so he got this fabulous production design, shooting on locations in the most magnificent places in Malaysia and India. And it was a screenplay he wrote, and it was magical. And then, of course, I've got to salute the incredible music of Guido and Maurizio De Angelis, that gave the immortal Sandokan songs. And suddenly, it was not just a historical piece. It was something that reverberated in every club and discotheque, on every radio station, because the songs were so contemporary. And between the great historical story and the contemporary style of music, it became a rage. And people loved what they saw, and I became a star.
Did that change you becoming a star? When was your moment when you realized, oh man, I'm a star now.
Well, I had that moment in India also because one of the first films I did became a hit, and I suddenly realized, my God, I'm a star. There were bigger stars than me, but still, I was a star. And then the strange thing is, when Sandokan released in Italy, I thought we had a flood of phone calls. Now, nobody called.
In terms of congratulations or new job offers?
Nobody called. Mind you, it was very difficult to call those days because you had to make appointments with the telephone operator to book calls, etc. Nobody called. And I thought this must be a bad news because nobody's calling me. It must be a disaster.
Yeah.
So I was pretty depressed. And the reason they didn't call me was everyone thought the other people had called. The producer thought the director called me. The director thought producer called me. My agent had some personal problems. She was the daughter of De Sica, Vittorio De Sica. She had some personal problems. She stopped calling me. And one journalist from Italy called me and said, "You must come. Your series is good." And just on that hope, I arrived in Rome with my fidanzata of the time, my fiancée of the time, Parveen Babi, was a big actress in India. And when we came down the airlines, the ramp, there was a ramp leading off the plane going down to the tarmac in the old days. So we came down, I saw this bank of paparazzi, and they were flashing. And I thought, who are they photographing? I looked up to see who they were photographing behind me. And Parveen gave me a nudge in the ribs and said, "They're for you." And suddenly I was smiling like a newly crowned Roman emperor, And I then realized that I was a star in Italy.
This is a fantastic story of, I can imagine that moment of you going like, oh, okay. And what I'm always fascinated with, and when I've seen you interact with people, is when someone comes to you and asks you for a picture. I've seen you do that, and they take a picture and they look at the phone, and you see that it's just a shit picture. It's wonky, light is bad, background is bad. You actually say to them, "Come here, well, let's do it again. Let's turn this way and make it nice for you." You still, after all those years in the industry and of fame and of limelight and people, millions and millions of pictures taken with you, you still care about the individual person. You also seem to care about and have the empathy of what that image means to them. You seem to be unfazed by your stardom and still seem to be the same person, humble as you are. How did you maintain that?
Well, I've always realized that if you are liked by people, if people call you a star, it's because the people like you. Our power comes from them. That's one aspect. The other thing is, I say to myself, it is 1 minute of my time, and it is a lifetime of memories for them.
Wow.
And therefore, I must make that minute. I owe them that minute. They made me a star.
This is a humbleness, though, that comes with it, and a gratitude that I can see that you portray that a lot of people seem to lose, even when it's just money and they're not famous. And again, that to me is a quality of a gentleman, as you are and as you describe it. Would you say that this is one of the main reasons why you sustain the career at such a high level? Because there's a lot of big stars, massive stars. 2-3 years ago, I don't know him today, no one knows him again. To sustain a career at a high level is probably the hardest thing to do, and not many are able to manage that. What are the qualities besides that humbleness that you would say someone needs to sustain a career at a high level, maybe in any industry?
It is a challenge in any industry to sustain a career at a certain level. For me, it was more complex because I had a career on 3 continents. In an age when there was no telephones, no internet, the fastest means of communication was the fax, and telephones were just hard. It was hard to make international calls and very, very expensive. How do you give the people the illusion that you're everywhere when you can only be in one place at a time? And my problem was that if I stayed in Bollywood, Italy and Hollywood would forget me. If I stayed in Hollywood, Italy and India would forget me. So I had to juggle between coming for events that were major public events that people saw me in and believed, therefore, that I was around and in the ethers. And it was not easy. The other thing is that, for me, the biggest challenge in Hollywood, especially, was that they were not writing roles for Asians. They were writing roles mainly for white actors. They weren't writing that many roles for black people or for Hispanics, and certainly not for the Asians. So how do you get cast if they aren't writing roles for you? Fortunately, because of the way I look, I told my agents, I said, look, don't just cast me for Asian roles. Give me anything that the Americans consider foreign, right? And I will play Spanish, I'll play Italian, I'll play German, I'll play Russian, I'll play anything. And that's how I got a lot of my earlier roles in Hollywood in various series. So you have to be flexible, you have to be willing to reinvent yourself, and you have to be willing to take chances. Sometimes you do a smaller role in a bigger film because it gets you noticed, because the film is important. You don't just say, I'm a hero, I only play leading roles. You can't do that. And so in my career, I played heroes, I played villains, I played supporting actors, I played fathers, I played grandfathers, I played sons. I played romantic heroes, I played dastardly villains. Done them all. Because you have to be flexible to maintain a career at different ages, in different countries, with different cinemas.
And you managed to do that, and
did my best. I haven't succeeded totally. I never think I've succeeded totally. There's many mistakes I made, and especially financial mistakes in terms of what I did with my investments and how I lost a lot of money there. Certain films that I regret turning down. Certain films that I regret doing. All those things. It's never a clean, faultless journey. We all make mistakes. The thing that you have to figure out is, how do you get up from a mistake, from falling down, get up and pick yourself up and carry on?
And what is something that you do to just keep going?
Okay, let me get really personal here. After about 15 years in Hollywood, I faced my worst time there.
Okay.
Because a lot of the investments I made absolutely went bad. They were risky, leverage investments, and they all turned against me.
Financial investments or project investments in terms of
financial investments. At the same time, my son was struck with schizophrenia. And I was dealing with his schizophrenia, and he was talking to me about wanting to commit suicide and how I tried to prevent him. There's a whole chapter in the book from committing suicide, that whole drama that is happening while my financial legs were being cut. And everything came to a head because in the end I lost him, I lost my money, and I lost my focus completely. I would go for auditions and I didn't know what I was doing. I would lose work and I was losing hope. And at that moment, I said to myself, I can continue to spiral down this road, or I can pick myself up and do something. So first, there has to be a decision that I'm not going to lament, not going to wallow in self-pity, that I'm going to change my reality. The first has to be the decision. And then you step by step push yourself to do what you have to do to get out of that mess. And one of the key things is to remember the person you were and the person who was successful. Because all the qualities that made you successful are the qualities that will get you out of your mess today. And that's what I reminded myself. That's what I did. I rebuilt my career, cinematic brick by cinematic brick, and eventually got on my feet again. So reverses we all have. It's rising above adversity that's the challenge. And it's a matter of a decision and a series of actions where you remember your strengths and use them to rebuild.
This is amazing. I almost feel like wrapping up this podcast. This is so inspiring to also see you don't just speak from a coaching seminar, because I've seen that. I met my wife at the Tony Robbins event.
Right,
there are so many people that just go there and take away things and then try and teach those things to others that they've heard but not experienced. I can sense and feel, and also when someone reads your book, that when you say that you've truly gone through that process and you've suffered, and I can see that probably also makes you this optimistic person today, and that positive person that attracts that positivity as well, because you've went through that in your own life. I feel, I didn't obviously experience those same things, but I feel I was on a fast track of seeing misery and being somewhat immersed in it as a paramedic. In my early career, my first career, when I started as a paramedic, 4.5 years, I used to see the biggest tragedies, maybe not unfold throughout years, but when someone got to the point of committing suicide, I've seen that and been there, and then maybe be the person trying and help and save that person. People shooting themselves in the head.
Wow.
Resuscitations in front of the family at a family dinner, children being in situations you don't never want your own child to be in. Seeing those miseries and then coming home, and
it's bound to affect you. It's bound to affect you.
It affected me in a sense where I start to get very numb, and I realized I have to stop doing the job, which is why then I stopped doing the job, in fact. And also gives me nowadays this happiness, this endless pond I feel of positivity I have, because when I wake up in the morning just thinking, wow, I got 5 fingers because yesterday I had someone that had 4 fingers because of an accident, that gives me a gratitude that I still can nourish my soul from nowadays, knowing that there are so many worse things that can happen, and what's the worst outcome? And that keeps me positive. And in your case, you mentioned age earlier and challenges that you go through. And in Hollywood and Bollywood, and where you have to, you said, manage a career throughout the ages. Which touches on my topic a bit, which is aesthetics and plastic surgeries and looks. You can't talk about stardom and not care about looks or mention looks, or at least know that they play a big role in how am I perceived on camera and perceived in different countries and in terms of the roles you can play. How have you seen looks affect other actors or yourself? And did a point in your career come where you got bummed up, where someone said, do you want to play the grandfather? And you thought like, God damn it, I want to be the hero, not the grandfather.
No, it's, as Shakespeare said, all the world's a stage, and each one in his time plays many parts. And we play different roles at different ages. Some ages are more difficult than others. But of course, appearance is something that's very important for actors, because that's what you see, and how they sound is also important. Many actors of the silent era were wiped out when sound came, and their voices didn't match what they looked like.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So sound and the visual is most important. So naturally, people want to look their best. And I think it's important that people shouldn't shy away from improving their appearance in any way they can, whether it means they're working out or whether it means them getting improvements to their face made surgically. In my Hollywood years, I had some bags removed from under my eyes, and more recently, I've had some surgery just over the eyelids, which was because there was too much, it was starting to impede my vision. And you can see, I can see perfectly clearly now. My eyes are clear, you can see me. It's not as though keeping that for sentimental reasons would have helped me in any way. You don't want to look like what you don't want to look like. And fortunately, I mean, I did all this before you owned the clinic, so I would have come here otherwise.
Don't worry.
But one was a long time ago, one was more recent, but I'm all in favor of that, because why shouldn't we look the best we can look if it's a matter of a simple surgery? It's not a very complex procedure. It's not like, a heart replacement or something.
Oh, yeah, that's next level.
Yeah. This is a fairly simple procedure, although it requires great skill on the part of the surgeons. But still, it's not something that disables you for months. It's something people should look at. Women have a thing where beautification of themselves is considered a normal, natural thing. For men often caught in the macho trap, beautification of themselves is a sissy thing. It's not. It's something you should be able to do for yourself because it doesn't hurt to look better.
It's something interesting that is happening, however, exactly what you're saying, that it becomes more normal. This is a trend that we are seeing in the Gentleman's Clinic. Mm-hmm. It becomes more normal for men to talk about it with other men especially. Because typically women have no problem with the men doing something. It's men amongst men to say, oh, what a sissy you are. That's what you're saying, that you're doing this. Also, the proof of that is Dwayne Johnson that has launched his own skincare routine for men. Someone like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
Right.
That's a man. He's got muscles. He's big. He's an action star. Imagine back in the glory days of Arnold Schwarzenegger being the action star hero to say, I have a skincare routine.
I know they would laugh at Arnold.
Exactly. They would laugh at him. Nowadays, it's really normal, and I think it's also healthy because I have interviews regularly with the news here in Switzerland and England and all over the world where they ask me, is it normal? Like, should men do that? Have clinics like the Gentleman's Clinic contributed to men feeling the need of having to do that? And all I say is that only comes from the normalization of men being able to do things without being looked down upon as a sissy thing to do. And it just became more normal. So now men do it, but the need and wanting to do that has always been there. Now they just can do it openly and without it being a secret, which helps them doing it with a series provider, not somewhere secretly hidden. And the only thing that I see different in the requests in the industry, men compared to women, is women tend to wanting to achieve a younger look, men more a fresh look and a normal look and being the best version of themselves. When someone does a surgery, they don't tell us, I want to look like I looked when I was 20. They just say, I want to look like a 50, 60, 70-year-old that didn't have stress and didn't go through a lot of things in life.
As they should.
Exactly. And that keeps that natural look of things. And it's interesting to see that trend and also the normalization of it, which I think is important and also touches upon a interesting topic, which is the mental health aspect, which you mentioned with your son that got schizophrenia and went through it. Not that has to do with plastic surgery, but I just simply see a lot of men here going through struggles. And some that obviously go through struggles and think they can solve them with plastic surgery, we say no to them. We have amongst clinics the highest rejection rate of people that come. But we see a lot of 20-something-years with depression. That comes from not having enough hair, and where we can help, we help when it makes ethically sense. But just the talk of mental health amongst men is so important, and I love that also came up. And where we can contribute when someone has big ears and we can make them shorter, or someone is 21 and is losing massive amounts of hair, it changes his life. He has male breast.
Absolutely. It does the world for their self-confidence. And one of the things about being a gentleman is that a gentleman has a certain sense of self-confidence. A gentleman has a way of doing things. A more sophisticated way, a more considerate way, a more thought-out way. In all ages, I think gentlemen had certain qualities that made them gentlemen because people looked up to them as being a different kind of person, a more cultivated kind of person. And I think that hasn't changed in essence even today. But today the topics that define gentlemen are different.
How do you think when you look back now as well and think about maybe the male idol, how is the perception of what it means to be a man or a gentleman changed, or has it changed? Or do you think it's just outdated of what we perceive as a gentleman nowadays?
You know, things change over time. I mean, if I look back, say, on the concept of what the perfect man is in terms of the Hindu religion, even there are differences. Because Ram, on whom a legendary epic was created called the Ramayana, a story of a man exiled from his kingdom, facing all kinds of obstacles, having to rescue his wife from being kidnapped by a demon, and he finally comes back to the kingdom. This is a man who does no wrong, a man who has always chosen the right thing to do at the right time, the perfect man. Then there's Krishna. Krishna is also a highly revered figure in Indian religion and mythology. And Krishna is part of another epic called the Mahabharata. This is like the sort of Iliad of India, or the Greek mythologies, but transplanted to India as different stories, but mythologies and deep religious beliefs attached. Now, Krishna is part of the Mahabharata. And there's a moment in the Mahabharata when he's the mentor of this young prince who has been exiled with his 5 brothers, and they're fighting now to come back. And the young man draws his bow and is about to launch the first arrow that begins the great war of the Mahabharata. And he pauses and he says, "Why am I firing this arrow? On the other side, there are my cousins, my uncles, people that might have done me wrong, but they're my blood. My ambition will result in the death of how many people? And why should I fight this battle?" And the reply that Krishna gives him became a book called the Bhagavad Gita, which is the holiest book of the Hindus.
One reply became a book.
Yes, that's the legend. Because it talks about the need to do your duty and let everything fall where they may. Do what is right, etc. However, Krishna, in the same battle, there was an elephant called Ashwatthama that was killed. And Ashwatthama was also the biggest religious figure for the head of the villains, right? And Krishna knew that if that man died, it would demoralize the opposition. But an elephant with the same name died, and he went and said, "Ashwatthama has died," which demoralized the opposition and changed the tide of the war. So he told a white lie for a larger cause, for a good law, for a larger cause. So the perfect man might always do what is right, but the complete man will do what is necessary to get done what is needed.
All right.
So even a white lie is not ruled out, as long as what you seek is true and justifiable and worthy of pursuit. So ideas of gentlemen, then the gentleman in Europe became sort of the dandy who dressed in these fancy suits and had these, a sort of ponciness about him, etc. And that sort of became... But the fact of the matter is the classic gentleman has always been somebody who is looked up to because of certain qualities he had, which made him a wonderful human being. So being a gentleman is no different than being a great human being who is a man.
I couldn't add anything else to this. I think you sum it up so well, and somehow people seem to struggle so much with this.
Yeah.
I actually read somewhere a fantastic little text that said, "You don't care about my age, you don't care about my income, you don't care about my wealth, you don't care about my religion, my skin color. You're such a fantastic being." And as I'm reading this, I'm thinking, wow, this is Buddha himself. This is who is that person? And then you kept swiping these texts, and it said, "Welcome, you're now on the level of my dog." They don't care how much you earn, what social status you have, the car you drive.
Right.
They love you for who you are. You're gone for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
You come back, they celebrate you.
Yeah.
This is what I love about dogs, and why I was so sad when our first dog died and why we have a new one now. It's simply the genuine love and admiration they have for you at all times.
The unconditional love, absolutely unconditional love. And that humans very rarely give each other, because love is always there. It can be genuine, but it's always bound by certain conditions and assumptions and expectations.
I don't think I could sum up this podcast better than with what you've said earlier. Is there anything you'd want to add to people that haven't read your book and really want to know more about you, the stories that you must tell? Now I'd say the stories that you have told.
Right.
Is there maybe one story that you haven't told that people don't know yet and would be surprised to know about you?
You know, my book is not just the story of an actor acting on 3 continents. It really harks back to my parents as well. It has my experience of my son as well. So it's very deep human experiences. But I think the story of my parents is quite interesting because my mother was English, my father was Indian. They met in Oxford as students. And he proposed to her saying, "Will you marry me? But I will be taking you to India where I intend to fight the English, your people, and I will be in jail most of the time and you'll be waiting outside jail to take me out." Not the most romantic proposal, but she accepted.
That's proper commitment, not just to the man, but also to the cause.
They were united by a common cause in the belief of the welfare of people and the evil of colonialism. And it's a fascinating story of a relationship that evolves over time to the point where my mother was handpicked by Gandhi to lead the non-violent Satyagraha revolution in our hometown. It moves on to where my father became a great teacher and preacher in Italy. It moves on to where my mother ended up becoming the highest ranked Buddhist nun in the world. And yet there was this incredible bond between the two of them, even though they were separated by beliefs, separated by geography, separated by different calls from different continents, but there was a bond that united them to the end. And it was a magical story. It's an absolutely magical story. I can tell you many other stories, but I don't know if you have the time for them. You know,
we'll wait for your second book.
Quite right. Quite right. No, I think also beliefs, you know, I've gone into a chapter where I've examined my beliefs as to where all this came from. How did we all get here? Because I'm also very inspired by the mystics of every religion that believe in union with God. And what God are they talking about? Because the mystics reject most of the formalism of religion, whether it's Muslim mystics like Rumi or St. Francis of Assisi, of Christians, or Ramana Maharshi of the Hindus, or Guru Nanak of the Sikhs. All these mystics have a vision of union with that, of the divine. So it's above the formalism of religion. But what was that energy that created the universe? That from a single atom, smaller than you can imagine, was created a universe that is so vast, you can't even imagine it. What was that energy and what caused creation? All these are things of great interest to me, which I've explored in my book.
I love that you still to this day have this curiosity and this, I can see a hunger for exploring.
Yeah.
And no wonder we could sit and talk for hours.
We could talk for hours.
So I I really thank you for the time, and I love that we got a little taste of who you are as a gentleman and how you think of what makes a gentleman.
Yeah.
We're only left to striving for that.
Quite right, quite right. And I must say that, a gentleman is also helped greatly by his environment and the people he surrounded himself with. And I think that a lot of his strengths come from not just what he gives to other people, but what he gets from other people. And right now, I'm married to Parveen, and she's my fourth wife. And I finally found somebody who works for me in a way that I wanted to work and gives me a lot of energy, a lot of caring, a lot of sharing that helps me be who I want to be. And for that, I really must thank her, because being who you are is never because of things you just did by yourself. It's also about what people did for you. And people who mentored you, helped you, cared for you, loved you, all those people made you.
Spoken like a true gentleman.
Thank you. Thank you, Giuliano.
Thank you, Kabir. Was für eine einzigartige Folge vom Gentleman's Clinic Podcast. Vielen Dank fürs Zuhören, fürs Anschauen. Ihr findet alle Details zu seinem Buch in der Beschreibung von diesem Podcast. Abonniert den Podcast und lasst uns wissen in den Kommentaren, was ihr davon haltet. Und ich freue mich, wenn ihr auch bei der nächsten Folge wieder dabei seid.